Pastor Kevin built heaven in virtual reality and discovered the digital paradise had excellent tax benefits. His VR company, Immersive Souls, created religious experiences, virtual reality church services that felt genuinely transcendent, digital environments that simulated sacred spaces, technology that made the divine feel tangible. But Kevin's greatest creation was tax optimization, virtual religious donations that generated real deductions, digital tithing that avoided traditional banking, cryptocurrency offerings that existed beyond government reach. The Metaverse Methodist Church was revolutionary, religious services conducted entirely in virtual reality, congregations that met in digital sacred spaces, spiritual experiences that transcended physical limitations. The theology was virtually perfect. God exists in all realities, physical and digital. Virtual worship is equally valid spiritual practice. Digital donations support our heavenly mission. His congregation was technologically sophisticated, VR enthusiasts seeking spiritual meaning, tech workers looking for digital salvation, investors who wanted both innovation and tax benefits. The church's financial architecture was virtually untraceable. Donations processed through virtual reality platforms, cryptocurrency transfers that occurred in digital environments, international religious accounts beyond regulatory oversight. Kevin's virtual sermons were immersively convincing, religious experiences that felt authentically spiritual, theological guidance that included financial advice, divine revelation delivered through VR headsets. The church's charitable work was digitally distributed. Virtual missionary activities in overseas jurisdictions, digital education programs that taught cryptocurrency, online community outreach that reached tax havens. His followers experienced virtual salvation, profound spiritual experiences through technology, real tax benefits from virtual donations, digital transcendence that generated earthly profits. But virtual reality left real-world evidence, server logs that tracked all virtual transactions, digital receipts that documented tax-deductible donations, virtual reality systems that recorded everything. The IRS investigation entered the metaverse, government agents conducting virtual surveillance, digital forensics that analyzed VR transaction data, real-world prosecution for virtual world tax evasion. Kevin faced federal charges for tax fraud, while his virtual church continued operating, while his followers questioned digital spirituality, while God remained notably absent from cyberspace. Kevin adjusts his custom VR headset, a $15,000 piece of equipment that most consumers won't see for another 5 years. One final time, the weight of the device presses against his temples, and through the high-resolution displays, he can see the virtual cathedral he spent 18 months perfecting. It's beautiful. It's inspiring. It's going to make him either incredibly famous or incredibly infamous. What Kevin doesn't know, what makes this whole story absolutely mental, is that the seemingly innocent black sedan parked across the street isn't occupied by late-night security guards or curious neighbors. Inside that vehicle, Special Agent Sarah Chen sits with her partner, Agent Rodriguez, surrounded by surveillance equipment that would make Ayahlas the tech prodigy, who created a religion for tax evasion, fraud, God, greed, and loopholes. Thursday, March 15th, 2018. 11:47 p.m. They're building infrastructure for massive fraud. Kevin adjusts his custom VR headset, a $15,000 piece of equipment that most consumers won't see for another 5 years, one final time. The weight of the device presses against his temples, and through the high-resolution displays, he can see the virtual cathedral he spent 18 months perfecting. Every detail is flawless. The way sunlight filters through digital stained glass, casting rainbow patterns on marble floors that exist only in computer memory. The acoustic modeling that makes whispered prayers echo with perfect reverence. The physics engine that makes virtual candle flames flicker with realistic randomness. It's beautiful. It's inspiring. It's going to make him either incredibly famous or incredibly infamous. What Kevin doesn't know, what makes this whole story absolutely mental, is that the seemingly innocent black sedan parked across the street contains two very patient, very determined federal agents who've been documenting his every move for the past 6 months. Special Agent Sarah Chen sits in the passenger seat, her laptop connected to surveillance equipment that can pick up electromagnetic emissions from Kevin's computers. Her partner, Agent Rodriguez, monitors radio frequencies and cellular communications, building a real-time map of every digital transaction flowing through Kevin's operation. They've got high-powered telephoto cameras recording everyone who enters and leaves the warehouse. They've got listening devices that can pick up conversations through the building's windows. And most importantly, they've got financial analysis software tracking the cryptocurrency transactions that form the backbone of Kevin's scheme. The federal government has been building its case with methodical precision, waiting for exactly the right moment to spring their trap. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, aren't we? Kevin thinks he's about to become a prophet. Actually, he's about to become the FBI's most wanted tech criminal. The question isn't whether Kevin will get caught. It's how spectacularly his perfect plan will fall apart. And trust me, when it falls apart, it's going to be absolutely biblical. 6 months earlier, September 12th, 2017, 2:30 p.m. Let me tell you how this whole mess started, because understanding Kevin's origin story makes his spectacular fall even more fascinating. Picture this, September 12th, 2017, a warm Tuesday afternoon in Palo Alto. Kevin Martinez, fresh off selling his second tech company for $38 million, sits in his uncle's accounting office, watching the most boring PowerPoint presentation of his life, and having the most expensive epiphany in tax fraud history. Kevin's uncle, Roberto Martinez, ran a boutique accounting firm that specialized in what he diplomatically called aggressive tax optimization strategies. Roberto's clients included some of Silicon Valley's wealthiest entrepreneurs, venture capitalists, and tech executives, people who made obscene amounts of money and wanted to keep as much of it as possible away from the IRS. Roberto himself looked like Central Casting's idea of a crooked accountant, short, round, with thick glasses and the kind of nervous energy that came from constantly looking over his shoulder for federal auditors. His office was a shrine to financial paranoia, with multiple safes, encrypted hard drives, and a paper shredder that could handle classified documents. "Kevin, my boy," Uncle Roberto said, clicking through slides showing how a tech CEO had turned a $20 million income into a $2 million tax bill. "The tax code is just badly written software, and like all badly written software, it's absolutely full of exploitable bugs." Kevin learned that afternoon how religious organizations enjoyed tax benefits that bordered on the miraculous. Churches didn't pay property taxes on massive real estate holdings. Religious donations were fully deductible, with minimal government oversight of how that money got spent. International missionary work could justify moving money anywhere in the world without triggering currency reporting requirements. And here's the beautiful part. The IRS was absolutely terrified to investigate religious organizations because of the political sensitivity involved. "It's like they're running on God mode in a video game," Kevin joked, watching Uncle Roberto show him a megachurch's tax returns. "More profitable than video games," Roberto replied, with a wink that should have sent Kevin running. "And a hell of a lot less regulated." That's when Kevin's brilliant criminal mind started spinning like a supercomputer processing a complex algorithm. Here he was, sitting on $38 million from his latest company sale, looking at paying nearly $15 million in capital gains taxes. He was also a tech genius who specialized in creating virtual reality experiences so realistic they could fool human brains into believing they were somewhere else entirely. His VR training programs for corporations had success rates that made traditional classroom learning look like Stone Age technology. and his uncle was showing him a legal system that essentially gave religious organizations a free pass to operate outside normal financial oversight. That's when Kevin Martinez had his billion-dollar, life-destroying epiphany. What if you could create genuinely spiritual experiences in virtual reality, attract wealthy tech workers seeking both meaning and massive tax breaks, then structure their donations through international religious networks that made the money virtually untraceable? The idea hit Kevin like a digital lightning bolt. Traditional churches were limited by physical space, geographic location, and the need for actual buildings. Kevin could create infinite virtual space, accommodate unlimited congregations, and provide personalized spiritual experiences that adapted to each individual user's psychological profile and emotional needs. It was brilliant. It was revolutionary. It was completely insane. And it was about to consume the next 2 years of Kevin's life while setting him up for federal prosecution. Kevin spent that night at Uncle Roberto's office, sketching out the technical architecture for what he would eventually call Project Paradise. On paper, it looked like a legitimate VR entertainment company, specializing in religious content. In Kevin's imagination, it was the foundation for the most sophisticated tax avoidance scheme in American history. The next 8 months became a blur of 16-hour workdays as Kevin developed both the technology and the theology simultaneously. The VR systems needed to create genuinely moving spiritual experiences. Otherwise, nobody would buy into the religious framework that justified the tax benefits. The financial structure needed to be bulletproof. Otherwise, the whole enterprise would collapse under IRS scrutiny the moment they started processing significant donations. Kevin hired the most expensive talent he could find. First came the technical team, VR developers from Google and Facebook, 3D artists from Pixar and Industrial Light and Magic, audio engineers who had worked on major film soundtracks. Then came the legal team, tax attorneys who specialized in religious law, international finance experts who understood offshore banking regulations, and cryptocurrency specialists who could navigate the emerging world of digital currency transactions. But Kevin's masterstroke was recruiting Father Michael Rodriguez, a former Catholic priest who had left the church after 20 years of service due to what he diplomatically called philosophical differences with Vatican financial practices. Father Rodriguez was brilliant, charismatic, and completely disillusioned with traditional religious institutions. He became the theological architect of Kevin's digital religion, creating a belief system that sounded authentically spiritual while providing maximum tax advantages for wealthy donors. God exists in all realities, Father Rodriguez wrote in the founding theological documents of what would become the Metaverse Methodist Church. Virtual worship is not just acceptable, it's potentially superior to traditional church attendance because it removes geographical barriers and allows for truly personalized spiritual experiences. Digital donations support our mission to bring divine experience to everyone, regardless of their physical location or economic circumstances. The documents were beautiful, profound, and completely designed to separate wealthy people from their tax obligations while making them feel good about it. Kevin's virtual church technology was genuinely revolutionary. Unlike physical churches limited by architecture and geography, Kevin's digital cathedral could expand infinitely to accommodate congregations of any size. The virtual environment could be customized for each individual user, displaying personalized religious imagery based on psychological profiles, cultural background, and spiritual preferences. The digital choir could sing in perfect harmony while adjusting musical styles and volume levels to match each person's emotional state. And the virtual collection plate could accept donations in 17 different cryptocurrencies, providing complete anonymity for wealthy donors who preferred their charitable giving to remain private. Now here's where Kevin's plan got properly diabolical, and this is important because it shows just how sophisticated this whole operation really was. Kevin wasn't just creating a virtual church to help wealthy people avoid taxes. He was creating what amounted to a criminal franchise operation that could be licensed to organizations nationwide, spreading his tax evasion methodology across the entire country like a digital virus designed to destroy government revenues. The business model was elegant in its simplicity and terrifying in its potential impact. Kevin would license his complete virtual church platform, the VR technology, the theological framework, the international money laundering networks, and detailed instruction manuals for implementing tax optimization strategies to other entrepreneurial criminals for substantial upfront fees, plus ongoing percentages of the money they helped their clients hide from the IRS. Kevin's target market was Silicon Valley's wealthy tech workers, people with high incomes, sophisticated understanding of both technology and tax law, and growing interest in spiritual practices that didn't require traditional religious commitment or physical church attendance. These individuals could afford to make substantial donations in exchange for both genuine spiritual fulfillment and massive tax savings that effectively meant the government was subsidizing their religious experiences. The church's membership structure was designed with the precision of a software architecture diagram. Basic membership cost $500 annually and provided access to virtual church services, online religious education programs, and standard charitable tax deduction benefits. Premium membership cost $5,000 annually and included personalized spiritual counseling with Father Rodriguez, access to exclusive virtual religious retreats in exotic digital locations, and enhanced tax optimization consulting that pushed legal boundaries to their absolute breaking point. But the real money, the criminal money, came from the premium services, where Kevin's team provided detailed guidance on structuring donations to minimize actual out-of-pocket costs while maximizing tax deductions. They had identified dozens of loopholes in federal tax law regarding religious donations, international money transfers, and cryptocurrency transactions that could be exploited by wealthy individuals with access to sophisticated financial advice. What Kevin didn't realize was that his uncle's accounting firm had been under federal surveillance for 2 years. Someone with a badge and very little sense of humor about tax fraud had been watching the Martinez family's financial activities long before Kevin started building his digital church empire. Sunday, February 4th, 2018, 9:45 a.m. Meet Special Agent Sarah Chen, 34 years old, 8 years investigating financial crimes for the FBI, fluent in 4 languages, and about to become the first federal agent in history to gather evidence of tax fraud while wearing a VR headset in a cyberspace church service. Agent Chen looked like she could have been one of Kevin's tech employees, Asian American, medium height, with the kind of precise, analytical demeanor that came from spending years unraveling complex financial crimes. But behind her wire-rimmed glasses and professional demeanor was a mind that had successfully prosecuted cryptocurrency money launderers, international tax evaders, and white-collar criminals who thought they were too smart to get caught. Chen had drawn what her colleagues jokingly called the short straw on this assignment: create a completely fictional identity, pose as a wealthy software engineer interested in both spiritual growth and tax optimization, then infiltrate Kevin's virtual church to gather evidence of criminal activity. The assignment sounded simple enough on paper, except for several complications that made Chen question her career choices. First complication: virtual reality made Agent Chen motion sick, seriously motion sick, the kind of motion sick that made her want to throw up after 15 minutes of wearing a VR headset. Second complication: Agent Chen was a practicing Catholic who felt genuinely uncomfortable pretending to find spiritual meaning in what she knew was an elaborate criminal scheme. Third complication: Kevin's virtual church technology was so sophisticated, so genuinely impressive, that Chen found herself occasionally forgetting she was gathering evidence for federal prosecution. But Agent Chen was nothing if not professional. She spent 3 weeks learning to navigate virtual reality environments without losing her lunch, studying Kevin's theological framework to understand the religious justifications he used for his tax optimization strategies, and creating a comprehensive backstory for her undercover identity that would appeal to Kevin's target demographic. Agent Chen's undercover identity was a masterpiece of federal creativity. Jessica Park, 29 years old, senior software engineer at a major Silicon Valley tech company, recently divorced, no children, annual income of $180,000, and genuinely interested in both spiritual growth and financial optimization. Jessica's backstory included details about her Korean-American family background, her struggles with finding meaning in high-tech corporate culture, and her growing interest in alternative spiritual practices that didn't require traditional church attendance. The moment Chen logged into Kevin's virtual cathedral for her first service, February 4th, 2018, 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, she understood immediately why this scheme was so dangerous and why Kevin's operation posed a genuine threat to federal tax revenues. Kevin hadn't just built a digital copy of a traditional church. He'd created something that seemed to transcend physical reality and tap into something genuinely profound in human psychology. Picture this: a virtual cathedral that stretched impossibly high, its soaring arches disappearing into clouds that sparkled with golden light. Massive stained glass windows depicted religious scenes that moved and shifted like living paintings, telling biblical stories through animated light patterns that responded to the congregation's emotional state. The digital organ's music didn't just play through Agent Chen's headphones. It seemed to resonate through her entire virtual body, creating harmonic frequencies that made her feel like she was standing inside a massive musical instrument. The acoustic modeling was so sophisticated that whispered prayers from other congregation members echoed with perfect reverence, creating an atmosphere of collective spiritual experience that felt more intimate than most physical churches. It was breathtaking. It was genuinely moving. It was also completely designed to make wealthy people feel good about committing federal tax fraud. Around Agent Chen, nearly 100 other avatars filled the virtual pews, and these weren't casual observers or curious tech enthusiasts. These were Silicon Valley's financial elite, represented by avatars that cost thousands of dollars to customize and required VR equipment that most consumers couldn't afford. Chen recognized the telltale signs of serious wealth: premium avatar designs with realistic facial animations, expensive haptic feedback systems that let users feel virtual textures, and the kind of casual confidence that came from never worrying about money. Kevin's avatar took the virtual pulpit, and Agent Chen had to admit he looked every inch the visionary religious leader. His digital appearance was carefully crafted to inspire trust and spiritual authority. Wise brown eyes that seemed to look directly at each individual congregation member, confident posture that conveyed both humility and leadership, and robes that shifted subtly between traditional religious vestments and modern tech entrepreneur casual wear. When Kevin spoke, his voice carried with perfect acoustic clarity to every corner of the vast virtual space, modulated by software that made every word sound personally directed at each individual listener. "Beloved congregation," Kevin began, his avatar gesturing toward the stunning virtual architecture surrounding them. "Today we gather, not in a building made of stone and wood, but in a sacred space built from pure intention and divine code. We are pioneers, exploring how modern technology can bring us closer to eternal truths that have guided humanity for thousands of years." Agent Chen activated her recording equipment, sophisticated FBI surveillance technology, disguised as standard VR accessories, while taking detailed notes on Kevin's sermon. The theology was actually quite sophisticated, weaving together traditional Christian teachings with modern ideas about virtual reality, artificial intelligence, and the nature of digital consciousness. Kevin quoted biblical scripture alongside tech industry luminaries like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, making compelling arguments that sounded both spiritually profound and technologically progressive. Our virtual church represents the democratization of spiritual experience, Kevin continued, his avatar now walking among the congregation with the kind of charismatic presence that made televangelists wealthy. Physical churches are limited by geography, architecture, and economic barriers. Our digital ministry can reach anyone, anywhere in the world, providing personalized spiritual guidance that adapts to individual needs and circumstances. Kevin explained how church members could donate cryptocurrency, receive full tax deductions based on inflated values, then have the church loan the money back for missionary work that coincidentally matched their vacation plans. During the private premium member consultation, Kevin offered to connect Chen with the church's financial blessing coordinators, specialists who could help restructure assets to maximize donations and tax benefits. Chen scheduled her next appointment, knowing she was about to gain access to the operational heart of Kevin's criminal enterprise. What Chen didn't know was that Kevin had been keeping meticulous records of every conversation, every transaction, every criminal strategy. He was building his own case file, one digital prayer at a time. Wednesday, March 7th, 2018. 4:15 p.m. 3 floors beneath the IRS building, financial analyst Rebecca Kim stared at computer screens displaying what looked like digital spaghetti. Kevin's money laundering network, winding through 17 countries and 43 financial institutions. "This is beautiful," Kim muttered, pulling up a 3-dimensional visualization of Kevin's criminal masterpiece. Completely illegal, but absolutely beautiful. Here's how Kevin's scheme worked. Premium members donated cryptocurrency directly to the church, qualifying for full tax deductions. Within 24 hours, that crypto got transferred to an exchange operated by something called the International Missionary Development Fund in the Cayman Islands. The Cayman exchange converted crypto to US dollars, then transferred money to the Digital Ministry Foundation in Switzerland. From Switzerland, funds split into dozens of smaller streams, flowing to banks in Singapore, Dubai, and other financial secrecy jurisdictions. But here's where Kevin got properly clever. After 6 months of international transfers, the money started flowing back to the United States through completely unrelated channels. Payments for consulting services to companies owned by church members, equipment purchases for overpriced computer gear, licensing fees for software that existed only on paper. Kevin had created a closed-loop system. Church members donated money, claimed massive tax deductions, then received most of their original donations back through seemingly legitimate business transactions. The numbers were staggering: $47 million in donations, $18 million in fraudulent tax deductions, $41 million returned to donors. Kevin's congregation had effectively stolen $18 million from the US government while keeping nearly all their original money. "There's more," Kim continued, showing Agent Chen evidence that Kevin was licensing his system to other organizations. "We've identified 6 other virtual churches using Kevin's blueprint, each generating millions in fraudulent donations." Chen realized they weren't just investigating one criminal. They were looking at a conspiracy that could spread tax evasion across the entire country. What nobody knew was that Kevin's biggest mistake wasn't the crime itself. It was the keeping detailed digital records of everything, every transaction, every conversation, every criminal strategy. He was building the government's case for them. Friday, April 13th, 2018. 6 a.m. Kevin Martinez woke up to 23 federal agents surrounding his warehouse. Through his apartment window, he watched FBI agents in protective gear, carrying computer equipment, while IRS investigators consulted thick files containing months of surveillance evidence. Agent Chen stood in the parking lot, no longer hiding behind her Jessica Park avatar. She was supervising the largest financial crime bust in Bay Area history. Kevin's hands shook as he reached for his phone. 47 missed calls, 32 text messages, and 1 email with the subject line, "Urgent Federal Search Warrants Executed." "Kevin Martinez," Chen called through his door. "This is the FBI. We have warrants for your arrest. Come out with your hands visible." Kevin opened the door wearing pajamas and the expression of a man whose perfect plan had just collided with federal law enforcement. Chen smiled grimly as she placed handcuffs on wrists that had typed millions of lines of code designed to defraud the US government. But the government's most dramatic move happened in virtual reality itself. At 9 a.m., federal agents logged into Kevin's virtual cathedral using his confiscated access credentials. Avatar FBI agents materialized in the digital sanctuary during a regular service. Chen's avatar took the virtual pulpit. "Attention church members," she announced to 67 premium members attending the service. "This is Special Agent Sarah Chen of the FBI. This virtual religious organization is under federal investigation for tax fraud and money laundering." The virtual church dissolved into digital chaos as avatars disappeared one by one, church members logging off in panic as they realized their sophisticated tax scheme had just collapsed spectacularly. Kevin's arrest made national headlines. Tech prodigy creates virtual church for tax evasion. Digital prophet arrested in cryptocurrency fraud. But Kevin's real nightmare was just beginning. Because federal prosecutors had something even more devastating than his arrest, they had his own meticulously kept records of every aspect of his criminal operation. Monday, September 10th, 2018. 2 p.m. Kevin Martinez stood before federal judge Patricia Hernandez, wearing standard prison orange, his hands shackled, and his dreams of digital salvation reduced to a pile of legal documents detailing 18 months of systematic criminal activity. The courtroom was packed with reporters, victims, and federal agents who had spent months building an airtight case against Kevin's conspiracy. Prosecutor James Morrison stood to address the court one final time. "Your Honor, Kevin Martinez created the most sophisticated tax fraud conspiracy in modern American history. His crimes weren't motivated by desperation. They were motivated by greed and arrogance." Morrison gestured toward a display showing the final accounting. $73.2 million in government fraud, $247 million in processed donations, $198 million in avoided tax obligations. Perhaps most troubling, Morrison continued, the defendant used legitimate religious beliefs as cover for criminal activities, potentially making it harder for real religious organizations to operate without government scrutiny. Kevin had spent weeks preparing his statement, working with lawyers to craft words that might demonstrate genuine remorse. "Your Honor," Kevin began, his voice barely audible, "I convinced myself I was building something revolutionary, but I know now I was lying to myself and everyone who trusted me. I used my skills to help wealthy people cheat while ordinary Americans paid their fair share." Judge Hernandez studied Kevin's face before consulting federal sentencing guidelines. "Mr. Martinez, based on the scope of your crimes and your leadership role in this conspiracy, I sentence you to 18 years in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release." 18 years. Kevin would spend the prime of his adult life in federal custody, emerging as a middle-aged man with a criminal record that would follow him forever. As federal marshals led Kevin away, the young man who had once preached digital salvation realized he would spend the next 2 decades learning that some sins carry consequences no amount of clever code can fix. Kevin's story became a cautionary tale that echoed through Silicon Valley boardrooms and federal prosecutor offices alike. The IRS recovered over $400 million in unpaid taxes from Kevin's clients and co-conspirators. Congress held hearings on cryptocurrency regulation and religious organization oversight. But perhaps the most fitting irony was this: Kevin Martinez, who had tried to create heaven in cyberspace, ended up discovering that earthly justice was very, very real. The digital prophet had fallen to earth. His virtual paradise had become his analog prison. And the government had proven that no matter how sophisticated the technology, old-fashioned criminal prosecution could still bring down anyone who thought they were too smart to follow the law. Kevin wanted to revolutionize religion and technology. Instead, he revolutionized federal investigators' understanding of financial crime in the digital age, and gave them a playbook for catching the next genius who thinks they can outsmart both God and government. Because in the end, there's no virtual reality that can escape real-world consequences. And when you try to cheat heaven and earth, one of them always collects.